the psychedelic sets you at the beginning of the path. And then people do all kinds of things with it. I mean, I am amazed. I feel there is more variation in how we deal with this than in almost any other phase of human activity, because some people seem to have almost no self-reflection. And I've noticed it also touches sexuality, because I don't know how many of you have ever encountered the Penthouse Forum, but this is where people write into Penthouse and detail these astonishing sexual, unpredictable sexual exploits, threesomes, foursomes, and twelvesomes that just fell upon them. And whenever I have, for some reason, some occasion to read these things, what is amazing to me is that this appears to be descriptions of the behavior of an alien species, because there is no self-reflection on what does this mean? You know, what does this mean that I get stuck in an elevator and end up copulating with 12 stockbrokers? It's just accepted as how it is. Well, you get this same thing with psychedelics, where you say to someone and they say, "Oh yeah, in the 60s I took psychedelics. You know, wow, it was really strange. All these colors and voices and apparently no self-reflection, no realization that this is actually happening to you. This is happening to you. Therefore, the implications must be fairly central." And then other people immediately get it. They say, you know, my gosh, this plant, this pill shows me that reality is at least 1,000 times larger than I thought it was. Showed me that I don't know who I am, where I am, what I am, or anything else. And I don't know what it takes to instill that in people. Maybe intellectual self-reflection. One of the things that is so puzzling about shamans when you actually deal with them in the field is they are not like the other people in the tribe. The other people in the tribe are very tribal people. In other words, they have all the curious cultural limitations of people in every culture. They think you smell funny, they think you look funny, everything you do is amusing. They stand around in small groups giggling and pointing and like that. The shamans, on the other hand, it's nothing like that. They accept you totally as a person. They make no cultural judgments. You don't look funny, smell funny, so forth and so on, because they are what I call extra-environmentals. They are deconditioned from the assumptions of their own culture. So they may be the Witoto shaman, but the Witoto shaman is less Witoto than any other Witoto, because the Witoto shaman operates in the context of Witoto-ness embedded in the larger reality. And so I think what we need to do when we try to revivify shamanism in our own lives is recover the profound reality of what it's doing. Sometimes I have flashes when I'm giving these talks of how different it is to be stoned than to talk about being stoned. I mean, here we sit, you know, in our cotton underwear, just with where we came from, our schedules in front of us. The mundaneness of it is so all-pervasive. And we could be discussing Gnosticism or a political action project, but we're discussing instead something really appalling, I think, I mean, we're calmly discussing the fact that there is another world overlapping our own, and very few people will even admit the fact. So I always think, and this is my symbol of myself, to myself, I always think of a wonderful B science fiction movie I saw when I was a kid, where there's a dinosaur in the swamp, and it's set somewhere in Mexico, and the typical campesino is sent by the patron of the ranch to gather firewood in the jungle. And he, of course, encounters this extremely large rubber reptile roaring around, and then comes back to the ranch and is pointing back in the woods, and is completely inarticulate, trying to say, you know, a creature from the id, a beast from another dimension is rampaging around in the forest. Well, they just dismiss him as, you know, these peasants, they believe anything, you can't trust them for a moment. This is the sort of situation we're in. The extraterrestrial invasion that so many people anticipate, or the extraterrestrial contact that so many people hope for and that sells so many cheap newspapers, is well underway. It's simply that the words we have to describe it are utterly inadequate. So words like extraterrestrial invasion, contact with an intelligent species, end of history, migration into hyperspace, these are pathetic signifiers of what is actually happening to us. What is actually happening to us is pretty darn hard to wrap your mind around. We are caught in a vortex of concrescence and compression that was set in motion at least as early as the melting of the last glaciation. We are reaping the fruits of 10,000, 50,000 years of sowing of the fields of mind, and it is being dropped into our laps for us to create human-machine interfacing, control of genetic material, redefinition of social reality, re-engineering of languages, revisioning of the planetary ecology. All these things fall upon us, and for us to be worthy of it, for us to make sense of it, for us to be anything other than victimized by the 20th century, we need, I think, to reach back into time and to anchor ourselves with the transcendent mystery, which is somehow tied up with our own being, somehow present on the planet, but mostly a large list of unanswered questions. We don't know what is going on this planet. We don't know why there is life here, whether it's an accident, somebody's plan. We don't know why intelligence is here. Again, accident, plan, if plan, whose plan, if plan, for what, if plan, where are we in the plan? I mean, we all tend, when we abandon ourselves to cultural values, to focus in so tightly that we lose the big picture. And if psychedelics are anything, they are a zoom lens back to the broadest possible point of view. Well, why don't we stop there and take just a 10-minute break or something, and then we'll come back and do dialogue on this. So why don't we use the rest of this morning to see if we're getting oriented right, and to just discuss any questions you have or anything that comes up for you out of this so far. Does anybody have anything? Yeah.
I was curious about what you were talking about with extraterrestrials and not having the appropriate language to really discuss it, and like your view of what's going on. And can you put it in words so that we can understand?
Well, it changes for me all the time. I mean, I don't have a point of view, and my primary job is not public speaking or writing, but exploring. When I first started taking mushrooms and throughout the 70s, when we wrote the Mushroom Grower's Guide, I held several opinions, but my most strongly held opinion was it actually is an extraterrestrial. Just no shit, flat out, it is an extraterrestrial. And what's surprising to me is that a single mushroom trip of a certain sort could probably put me right back there again. Getting it worked down to Gaia or the overmind of the species is a kind of process of coming down from the real assimilatable context of the experience. It's like an extraterrestrial. I would certainly say this, if extraterrestrials appeared over Washington and Moscow tomorrow, it wouldn't make this any less mysterious or puzzling. In fact, the extraterrestrials might turn out to be mundane. This is not. How it speaks, this is the most astonishing thing for me to get used to. I mean, the visual hallucinations, somehow I can work it around that these are floods of imagery set off from deep structures of the brain and dumping of memory banks, but that it can just address you in real time and say, Terence, and then proceed to blow my mind. And now several things may be happening here. The only time when we have the experience of focusing on an incoming message, decoding it in real time, and responding to it immediately is when we have a conversation with someone. So if you find yourself responding to a message in real time, your brain automatically thinks you're having a conversation, saying, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it must be a duck. So here I am listening and responding to someone speaking to me in English. Therefore, this must be a conversation. There are physical arguments for viewing the mushroom as extraterrestrial. First of all, what is psilocybin? Psilocybin is 4-phosphoryloxy-NN-dimethyltryptamine. Of all the indole compounds in nature, only psilocybin is hydroxylated at the 4 position. Well, now, if you were to design a computer program to search Earth, to search the life forms of Earth for evidence of extraterrestrial origin, one of the things you would tell this program to do is look for unusual molecules that have no apparent cousins or relatives among other organisms. Well, here is psilocybin, phosphorylated in the 4 position. Nothing else on Earth is. A material argument for its origin outside of the terrestrial ecosystem. A slightly different argument that would see the mushroom as extraterrestrial is look at its style. for want of a better word. I mean, what is a mushroom? First of all, they reproduce by spores. Spores are the most economical biological unit imaginable. They can survive the radiation levels of interstellar space. They can survive for eons under conditions very close to those encountered in deep space. The mushroom spore falls into an ecosystem, immediately undergoes cell division, a fine thread-like network full of neurotransmitters begins to spread itself through the soil. It's very closely analogous to the neural network of a higher animal, including a human being. Now, we're accustomed to thinking that an extraterrestrial would bear the imprint of the evolutionary situation in which it came to be. In other words, if it evolved on a low-gravity planet, it will be tall and thin. If it evolved in a methane atmosphere, it will have an exotic body chemistry and so forth. But that's because we ourselves have possessed the knowledge of how DNA works for only about 40 years. It's reasonable to assume, I think, that if an intelligent species gets 1,000 years of study of DNA, that they can design themselves to be however they care to be. And in fact, if you think of the mushroom from that point of view, I think that we might choose that kind of an adaptation if we could have any form we wanted, because it's very non-invasive, very humbly insinuates itself into a situation and grows essentially on waste material in the soil. Yet when it sporulates, it can actually cross the boundary of outer space. And, great economy, great artistry, tremendous Zen-like aesthetics seem expressed in the mushroom if you view it as a designed piece of work rather than an object in the environment. And then finally, of course, the major argument for the extraterrestrial origin of the mushroom, but it's an insider argument, is the content of the experience. Number one, it says it's an extraterrestrial organism, and it has the data to back up the claim. It can show you movies of desert worlds, jungle worlds, high pressure, high gravity, methane worlds, planets whose cores are helium-4, and worlds where you don't know whether you're inside an organism or inside some kind of piece of machinery, whether you're under the surface of a planet. I mean, literally things that our minds just stop in the presence of. So to me, that's really the interesting thing about the mushroom, is that it can be as friendly as it needs to be, and can even reassure you with a Disney-esque burlesque of dancing flowers and pirouetting pink elephants. But once you are comfortable with it and enter the dialogue and begin to get to know it, getting to know it is an appalling experience, because you can say to it, show me a little more of who you are for yourself. And then, a veil is lifted and your jaw just drops. And then you say, show me a little more of who you, and that's enough of who you are for yourself. And you wonder, while this thing is talking to me, how engaged is the mushroom by me? Is all of its attention focused upon me when I'm talking to it, the way all of my attention is focused back on it? Or is it like a multi-user computer system? Is it able to simultaneously deal with huge numbers of organisms? What is the relationship of psilocybin to the inner life of the mushroom? Is it stoned all the time? Why is it so important that these indole compounds get lodged in the nervous system of mammals? It's almost as though it's a symbiotic relationship, that the mushroom does not truly live its life unless it is taken, unless its unique molecular component can find its way into the synapses of a self-reflecting higher animal. Well, then what are we for it? And, you can ask these questions.
I think that it's observant, like they don't, you have to approach them.
Yes, they usually, one reason I think people have had trouble confirming the animate and intelligent quality of the mushroom is you must ask. You just don't take psilocybin and sit there, because it won't do it. But if you take psilocybin and call it, in some sense, whatever that means, invoke, call, try to visualize, then it will begin to come towards you and lift these veils. And this world of zany, pun-like, hyperdimensional intelligence that is revealed is as strange as an extraterrestrial would be. This is, I guess, the final content of evidence for the extraterrestrial origin, is the fact that it just seems so different from anything one could conceive of or imagine. I mean, you cannot, in one of these volleys of hallucination, convince yourself this is only me. These are my memories, or these are distorted transforms of past experience. Because I was trained as an art historian to have an eye for stylistic difference and cohesion of a set of aesthetic canons, and it just blows my mind. I mean, there is more art locked up in these things to be viewed in a single hour than the human race has produced in 10,000 years. I mean, and art of a compelling, weird, breathtaking, awesome quality that just breathes in every pore of itself. This is the other. This is not you. Don't be deceived, my little primate friend. Yeah.
It seems like our popular culture has had inklings of that, because if you look at the movies that came out, between 1952 and 1962, so many of the sci-fi movies are about spores from outer space and planets coming down, and these are from very straight people who hadn't taken, psychedelics at all. They were like tuning into what was about to come 10 or 15 years later.
Well, I think, and I'm, so far as I know, pretty alone in this opinion, that information actually, a very small percentage of information is able to tunnel backward through time, that there is a very small counterflow to the forward movement of causal efficacy. And one of the things that shamanism is about is going into that hyperdimensional place and picking up this thin signal from the future and tuning it in. This is why prophecy and seership and all of that has to do with states of ecstasy and intoxication. One way of viewing all religion and all spiritual metaphor making is as an anticipation of the future. These Western religions have this apocalyptic transformation built into them almost as a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, they believe the world is going to end because the world is going to end. And since the melting of the glaciers, people of sufficient sensitivity have heard through a vast wall of stochastic noise coming from the future the thin, reedy broadcast manifestation of the true vision of the future. And this seems to be one of the things that you can do with these psychedelics, is tune this in. You know, it's a cliche, and I'm sure you've heard it, that artists are society's antenna for change, that artists are supposed to be somehow more sensitive than the rest of us, and they pick up the new design forms, the evolving aesthetic canons, and then translate it into society for the rest of us. Well, that gains a little more bite if you substitute shaman for artist and realize that this may not be a metaphor. It may not be simply because they pursue bohemian lifestyles and are willing to accept poverty for a life of free thinking and so forth. That isn't what's allowing an anticipation of the future. What's happening is there truly is an anticipation of the future. And visionaries like William Blake or the author of Revelations are actually people who, by virtue of some fortuitous confluence of circumstance, space, time, and genetic constitution, are able to draw these messages out. What is startling is that apparently this is fairly ordinary in psychedelic states, that in fact one way of thinking of psychedelics is you begin to move through time when you put them into your life. I don't mean while the trip is happening. I mean ever after. I mean, if you're living with a 1960s style mind and you have a strong psychedelic experience, you will come down with a 1970s mind, or perhaps a 2040 style mind. Mind is a temporal style. It's like clothing. This is what McLuhan understood, you see, that we dress ourselves out of the closet of ideology